Gonna talk some NFL football today. Just state of the league, what the teams look like going into the 2022 draft. Probably one of the most exciting and crazy marches that we've ever had. We had free agent and trade galore going on. Looks a little bit lopsided this year. The AFC is head and shoulders way better than the NFC right now. As far as, and who knows how that's going to turn out. I mean, I could be dead wrong and the NFC ends up schooling the AFC. But just the way it looks with quarterbacks, it just is incredible right now. So I'll start with the AFC. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start with some of these rule changes. So in the playoffs now, both teams are going to get the football regardless of who scores or if another team scores a touchdown or what have you. Both teams are going to get the football. So this rule was obviously made because of the Kansas City Chiefs-Buffalo Bills game. Jared Allen never got to touch the football in overtime. Patrick Mahomes drove it right down, stuck it in the end zone. Game was over. Bills Mafia and a lot of fans, mostly fans that were sick of seeing the Chiefs successfully make it to another round again, were upset by that. So we've changed the rules, and now that's going to happen. Now, some people are asking why it's not happening during the regular season. Well, I think that in the regular season, you're going to see too many players end up getting hurt, extending the games too long. And in the regular season, you do end up with a lot of ties because not everybody has a Jared Allen and a Patrick Mahomes on their team. You do have several mediocre to subpar quarterbacks in this league. So that being said, it's not a foregone conclusion that if this particular person gets the ball in overtime, the game's over. If you have two crappy teams playing against each other, you may end up with a tie. So they're not going to do that until you get to the playoffs, where, let's face it, basically every team that got to the playoffs this year, it was the best quarterback in that division. That team won its division. So that's the way they're looking at it. Moving on to what the teams are looking like. In the AFC, especially with that trade now that sent Matt Ryan to the Colts, that's yet another. And I still consider Matt Ryan a good quarterback. I think he's been stuck in a tough situation there in Atlanta. But I think Matt Ryan is a different and upgraded version of what the Colts had a couple of years ago with Phillip Rivers. I think Matt Ryan is in a healthier and better position than Phillip Rivers was a couple of years ago, and Phillip Rivers did a nice job for the Colts. The Colts still have that Super Bowl caliber defense. They need to find another target at the wide receiver position, but this is a very deep draft with wide receivers. So if the Colts can find somebody, or they can develop that 6'7" monster that I think you pronounce his name Strahan or Strawn. But the Colts could have an impact, especially on their division now. I don't necessarily think that it's a foregone conclusion that Tennessee is going to run away with that division. So Matt Ryan is a leader. He's been an MVP. He's gone to the Super Bowl. He's not somebody who's going to make a whole lot of dumb decisions. So I like him as the starting quarterback of the Colts. The teams in the AFC that I think you'd have to take a look at and say, probably not a chance. Obviously, the Houston Texans. Look, if you can name more than 4 starters on the Houston Texans team, you're a better man than I am. Obviously, I'm joking a little bit there, but still, that's... But beyond Houston, I mean, some people may say Jacksonville and some people may say New York, But if Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence end up having some really nice advancements in their sophomore seasons in the NFL, especially with all the money that New York and Jacksonville spent in this offseason, both of those teams could make huge leaps in their in those quarterbacks' second season. So I don't want to just haphazardly write off both of those teams as foregone conclusions that they're going to be terrible. And Jacksonville is under a new head coach in Doug Peterson, who's obviously a quarterback type of coach. He was a quarterback in the NFL, back up at the Green Bay Packers for many years. So he could very well help develop Trevor Lawrence. But beyond that, every other team besides those three, Houston, New York, and Jacksonville, every other team's expecting to make the playoffs. Now, some people might say, well, Pittsburgh. But guess what, folks? Pittsburgh's got a Super Bowl defense. You got T.J. Watt, Defensive Player of the Year. You got Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety. You've still got an outstanding defensive line. They picked up Miles Jack to go along with Devin White. I'm sorry, is that... Devin Bush, I'm sorry. Devin Bush at inside linebacker. You still got Cameron Hayward and Tyson Alualu, Stephon Tuitt. I mean, they're loaded on the defensive side of the ball. And on the offensive side of the ball, they've actually added a couple of nice pieces to their offensive line. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson at wideout. Pat Freiermuth is a nice young tight end. Najee Harris is a star in the making at running back. Again, it's going to come back to quarterback play. They picked up Mitch Trubisky, who, since he has left the Bears, there's been a lot of nice things said about him. He played well in Buffalo when he had the chance to go in there, and obviously it was always during garbage time, but the coaching staff in Buffalo said that he worked really well in practice and did a lot of nice things and developed nicely. Now, I have no reason to not believe them because, look, Jared Allen, when he first came to Buffalo, he had a lot of work to do. And now that coaching staff in Buffalo has turned Jared Allen into, well, Jared Allen. So what's to make us believe that they couldn't take a former first-round draft pick like Mitch Trubisky and do something special with him? And now he's going to Pittsburgh, and he's going to play for a coach like Mike Tomlin, who's, not an offensive-minded guy, but he's a very steady hand. And it's not a crazy atmosphere. He's going to have some type of control on that roster. Matt Canada's the offensive coordinator. We'll see what they can do. Pittsburgh hasn't had a losing season since Mike Tomlin's been there. So is there any reason to think, even with the other three teams in that division, Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, you can look head to toe and say, okay, maybe they all have nicer rosters than Pittsburgh. Do any of you want to put any amount of money that you care about down that Pittsburgh is going to finish dead last in that division? Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm not going to. I've seen the Steelers with that defense and running games and Mike Tomlin's leadership too many times. Like, how in the hell did they make the playoffs? Baltimore was supposed to be better. Cleveland's supposed to be better. Cincinnati went to the Super Bowl last year. Yeah, but the Steelers still ended up sneaking in there. So I'm not going to bet against Pittsburgh either. Then there was Miami. And now Miami added some pieces, namely Tyreek Hill. Speed is the name of the game in Miami at this point. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I'm not sure there's a faster duo in the NFL. As a matter of fact, I know there's not a faster duo in the NFL. Picked up Raheem Mostert at tailback to go along with Chase Edmonds. Mike Gesicki still at tight end, and they still have a very nice defense themselves. Xavier Howard just signed an extension there. So that's a team that you would look at that roster and go, okay, Tua. Let's see exactly how high or low your ceiling really is. Because, again, it's going to come down to him. No one really knows until they get out onto the field. But let's face it, that's why the other guy isn't there anymore. He wasn't real fond of Tua. And it basically cost him his job. And now you have Mike McDaniel in there who sings to his praises and thinks that he'll be able to, him and Frank Smith will be able to work with him and get Tua to that next level. And if they can, Tua's got weapons galore now. And he's going to need them in that division because he's playing from behind trying to catch Jared Allen and Mac Jones, which are the two teams in that division that most people think are going to finish 1 and 2. Obviously, Buffalo atop, because Buffalo was outstanding going into the offseason, and they just loaded up. So you can tell Buffalo's making a run because they only got better this offseason. They absolutely loaded up. Looking at New England, re-signed Malcolm Butler. That was kind of interesting. But they have a nice roster as well. They're looking like they could, if Mac Jones takes again that big sophomore step. He had a really nice rookie season. I mean, I hear some people saying, "Well, remember Tom Brady was kind of a game manager in the beginning." Yeah. I don't know if Mac Jones is the next Tom Brady. I don't think he has as high of a ceiling as Tom Brady does. But nobody thought Tom Brady had as high of a ceiling as Tom Brady ended up having. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten picked as late as he did. But New England is definitely a team that expects to be in the playoffs. So that's what we're talking about now. I mean, Miami obviously added some nice pieces. I don't know if they expect to be in the playoffs, but New England definitely does. New England expects to be in the playoffs. Buffalo expects to be in the Super Bowl. Added Jamison Crowder in the wide receiver room to go along with Gabriel Davis, Stephon Diggs. Added big Roger Saffold from Tennessee on their offensive line. O.J. Howard at the tight end position. Obviously got Von Miller from the Rams. I mean, they're loading up. They're not they're not taking their foot off the gas. They're going full steam ahead. AFC North. We talked about the Steelers already. The Browns. It's all going to depend on when Deshaun Watson gets there because he's got the 22 civil cases against him. Whenever he gets there, he could be suspended for 4 games, 8 games, the whole season, no games. I don't know. It all depends on how those cases go and what the NFL wants to do. But that's a loaded roster. And they picked up Amari Cooper. They still have Donovan Peoples-Jones, Jakeem Grant, a stellar offensive line, 2 of the best running backs in football. Harrison Bryant, David Njoku at tight end. Picked up Chase Winovich to go along with Myles Garrett. I mean, I'm trying to find the weakness on this team from a roster standpoint. They basically addressed their secondary last year. We saw what they wanted to address this year. Quarterback position. Doesn't everybody? What are they going to do with Baker? What are they going to get for Baker? Because Baker's still on that team. Baltimore, Bateman, Brown, Duvernay. Miles Boykin is the 4th receiver on that team. Mark Andrews at tight end. J.K. Dobbins didn't play last year. Think about that for a second. He's back at running back. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Ricard at fullback. Again, Baltimore always has a nasty defense. They're going to be just fine on the defensive side of the ball. And now you talk about the defending Super Bowl representative from the AFC. That is a young team, and you have a bunch of people going into their sophomore campaign. Most notably, Jamar Chase. And what did everybody say was Cincinnati's biggest weakness? Their offensive line. Well, they've replaced or upgraded in 3 different positions. Ted Karras at center, Alex Kapp at right guard, Lyle Collins at right tackle. And you still have Jonah Williams at left tackle and Jackson Carman at left guard. So they've done what they think they need to do to improve protecting Joe Burrow. And if you can give Joe Burrow a couple of more seconds each time he drops back to pass, whew, with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, that should be illegal. Hayden Hurst at tight end. Defensively, maybe a little bit of work to do. I'd like to see their linebacking core get a little bit stronger. I mean, Pratt and Wilson are nice, but that's what the draft is for. Got some nice linebackers coming out this year. So let's see what they can do. They address the offense in free agency. They'll probably address the defense in the draft, I'm assuming. We already talked a little bit about the Colts in the AFC South. They need more weapons than just Pittman, Campbell, and Mo Alley Cox for Matt Ryan. They've got Jonathan Taylor at tailback and a really nice offensive line. There's a lot of people that think that Indianapolis's offensive line, even with one of their tackles retiring, is still one of the top 5 offensive lines in football, which it probably is. And Jonathan Taylor uses that to his utmost. And we all know how good that defense is, led by all-pro linebacker Darius Leonard. They made that trade with the Las Vegas Raiders to bring over Yannick Ngakoue to rush the passer opposite side of Kwity Paye. That should be a nasty little pass rush there in the AFC South. Paye and Ngakoue. That'll be a nightmare for quarterbacks. We got DeForest Buckner coming up the middle. It's kind of what the Rams used last year. They had Leonard Floyd and Von Miller coming off the edges with Aaron Donald going up the middle. That was really, really difficult for teams to have to deal with. And if everybody remembers, that's when the Chiefs started playing better last year, when they went out and they were able to move Chris Jones back to D tackle when they had Frank Clark at one defensive end, and they went out and got Melvin Ingram from the Steelers. When they brought in Melvin Ingram and they were able to move Chris Jones back to D tackle, all of a sudden Kansas City started winning a bunch of games in a row because they were able to get pressure on the quarterback. It's the name of the game. Tennessee, A.J. Brown is still there. They picked up Robert Woods. Nice offensive line. Ryan Tannehill's there. Derrick Henry, that offense runs through him. When that play action gets going, though, having A.J. Brown and Robert Woods there, and now Austin Hooper at tight end, that's going to... And obviously with Mike Vrabel as their head coach, he's not going to let that defense suffer. So you're not going to see this defense get blown off the field too many times. So Tennessee is going to be a force to be reckoned with. All these teams that I've named recently, Buffalo, New England, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Tennessee. So far, that's 2, 5. That's 7 teams right there that expect to be in the playoffs, and we haven't even hit the AFC West, the best division in the AFC. All 4 of them expect to be in the playoffs. All 4 of them have a claim at possibly being the best team in the AFC. You know, obviously you got Buffalo and Tennessee, but these 4 teams are loaded. Now, Kansas City just took a hit losing Tyreek Hill. They signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's an extremely poor man's Tyreek Hill. He runs a 4.37 40, but that's basically where the similarities end. They got McCole Hardman, and they picked up Juju Smith-Schuster, who, I don't know, he might be better at TikTok than he is at wide receiver these days. But Travis Kelce is still one of the best tight ends in football. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back, and Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. So with Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy running that offense, I don't see them suffering too bad. And now they have draft picks galore, and they have a lot of money after unloading that Tyreek Hill contract. So they still have some free agency money to spend, and they've got draft picks. So in a draft where you can get first-round wide receiver talent deep, and I mean deep into the second round this year, and what'd they say? There was like 13 guys that ran a sub 4.4. Kansas City's going to reload. That kid out of Ohio State, Chris Olave, he runs nasty routes. He will literally break your ankles. If I'm Kansas City, I'm looking at him because he's probably the closest thing to, in my opinion, Tyreek Hill in the draft. And, of course, he can fly. So, pass rush is going to be a problem if they don't get somebody other than Frank Clark, because Frank Clark is he's a bigger defensive end. He's over 270 pounds, so he's not the most fleet of foot defensive end. And you got Chris Jones going up the middle. They need that speed rusher. The other side right now, they have Mike Dana. I think they'd like to re-sign Melvin Ingram. It'd be to their benefit. Nick Bolton, that linebacker, had a really nice season. Kid out of Missouri. So we'll see how that turns out. But all 3 of the other teams, they leveled the playing field. I mean, obviously the big one with the Broncos, they pick up Russell Wilson. And they got Billy Turner. Billy Turner is quietly, he's a really nice offensive tackle. Did a really good job for the Green Bay Packers the last several years. They stole Randy Gregory like a thief in the night from the Dallas Cowboys. Great pass rush now with Gregory and Chubb. Patrick Surtain, one of the best young cornerbacks. Patrick Surtain the second, one of the best young cornerbacks in the NFL. Denver's going to be loaded this year. The LA Chargers, Justin Herbert, he's going to be outstanding. Justin Herbert's going to be a special quarterback. He's got all the tools. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. He's got Gerald Everett at tight end now. Austin Eckler at tailback. They just backed up the Brinks truck for Mike Williams at wide receiver. And now they made that trade for Khalil Mack with the Bears. So they've got Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack there. That's... Man, I tell you what, the Chiefs better sign Melvin Ingram because everybody else in that division has a vicious pass rush. We haven't even gotten to the Raiders yet. Adderley and James at safety. Yeah, they need to strengthen their rush defense. Sebastian Joseph Day from the Rams, maybe that can help. The Raiders, obviously, Derek Carr quietly had an outstanding season last year. That young man took a beat-up team. And I'm talking mentally and emotionally after everything that happened with their former head coach, John Gruden, their former first-round draft pick, Henry Ruggs, and the unfortunate DUI that took the life of the young lady and her dog. And he put that team on his back along with Rich Bisaccia, who's now the special teams coach in Green Bay, and somehow willed them to the playoffs. But you got Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake, and now Brandon Bolden. They added Amir Abdullah. They've got a deep running back room now. Picked up Jacob Johnson for fullback. Darren Waller and Foster Moreau at tight end. Darren Waller's an incredible athlete. They need to solidify that offensive line a little bit more. They definitely need to solidify that offensive line a little more. But as far as weapons, good grief. That receiver room now, Devontae Adams, Bryan Edwards, Hunter Renfrow, Demarcus Robinson, Mac Hollins are probably their top 5 wide receivers now. I mean, it's... How do you guard either Adams or Renfrow? And when they're both on the field, good luck. And by the way, when Adams and Renfrow are on the field, Darren Waller's probably going to be on the field too. Not to mention that both Jacobs and Drake can catch out of the backfield. You're going to have a linebacker guarding somebody, and turn out the lights, the party's over if that's the case. Defensive side of the ball, yeah, their pass rush, Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Holy crap, people. You know who I feel sorry for in the AFC, or at least the AFC West? The offensive tackles. Because almost all of these defensive ends or rushing outside linebackers are the type of guys that you basically have to double team every play. And now there's 2 of them on every team. They just re-signed Big Jonathan Hankins. He's going to probably be their nose guard. They got Vernon Butler from Buffalo. Bilal Nichols from Chicago. Picked up Jayon Brown at linebacker from Tennessee. They still got Denzel Perryman, who led them in tackles. Divine Diablo came on real strong at linebacker. Picked up Kyler Fackrell from the Chargers. They still have Cleveland Ferrell. They think that they can do something with him. I don't see it, but that's why I'm not a head coach. Got Rock Ya-Sin from the Colts in that trade. Trevon Moehrig, second-round safety. And Trayvon Mullen is back. Nate Hobbs is a really nice nickelback. Like to see Jonathan Abram improve his pass coverage. He's a hell of a hard hitter, and he can come down and play linebacker in certain situations, but he just gets roasted in passing situations. But they're much improved all over. But I mean, when you have Chandler Jones and Max Crosby rushing on every down, exactly how long is Jonathan Abram going to have to be guarding somebody? A second and a half? So that's 11 teams in the AFC that will all consider it a failure if they don't make the playoffs. A failure. 11 of them. Only 7 get to go. The NFC? What teams expect to make the playoffs? Well, in the NFC West, probably 3 of them: Arizona, Los Angeles, San Francisco. In the NFC South, probably Tampa, maybe New Orleans. So we'll call it 5. In the NFC North, Green Bay. They expect to make the playoffs. So now you're at 6. And then the NFC East, Dallas would make it 7. And if you throw the Eagles in there just because and the only reason I would is just because they made it last year, that would make 8 teams. But if the Eagles didn't make it, or if the Saints didn't make it, or if the Cardinals or the 49ers, because, Kyler Murray or Hopkins or Bosa or Deebo Samuel got injured and they lost 3 or 4 games in a row and they missed the playoffs, would they consider the season an utter failure? No. If Green Bay missed the playoffs, they'd consider the season an utter failure, even though they have 0 receivers right now. I just have to believe they're going to do something before the draft. They're going to pick up, some receiver in free agency or make a trade for a DK Metcalf or a Tyler Lockett. Aaron's not going to stick around for a bunch of practice squad guys. Saints are better than what people think they're going to be. Buccaneers obviously have Tom back. Godwin signed his deal. Fournette's back. I think Ndamukong Suh wants to come back. I don't know if they want him back, but I think he wants to come back. Carlton Davis is back. So Tampa's loaded again. Los Angeles, loaded. Van Jefferson, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp. And I know they'd like to bring back OBJ. They still have Ben Skowronek from out of Notre Dame. Tutu Atwell's coming back off an injury. They did lose their left tackle. I mean, he was 174 years old, but he still played well, Whitworth. But looks like they're going to have Cam Akers for a whole year if he doesn't get hurt again, so that'll be nice for them. The weakest part of their whole team, I've said for a long time now, was their inside linebacking core, and they just added Bobby Wagner. Now, Bobby Wagner hasn't played a whole lot of inside linebacker in the 3-4. He's usually the middle linebacker in a 4-3, so we'll have to see how he gets worked in there, but I think he'll do fine. Somebody as talented as Bobby Wagner will make the shift. They're going to have to figure out pass rush stuff because losing Von Miller is going to hurt a little. You still got Leonard Floyd on one side. You got Aaron Donald coming up the middle. Is Terrell Lewis on the other side going to be the same? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I don't think he's going to be Von Miller. He's certainly not making the same money Von Miller is. And you still got Jalen Ramsey. So, I mean, the Rams and the Buccaneers, in my opinion, are the odds-on favorite. You can't throw Green Bay in there right now. They have no receivers. I mean, they're loaded in a lot of other places. They got David Bakhtiari coming back at left tackle, so he's back. You've got Elgin Jenkins coming back. You do have Josh Myers. You got Royce Newman. You've got a lot of pieces there on the offensive line. They could have a really nice. Robert Tunyon's coming back at tight end. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon at running back. And I'd like to see them get Amari Rodgers involved in a slot role. You drafted him 3rd round out of Clemson a year ago. Allen Lazard, I think, is an underrated receiver, which is why they put a 2nd round tender on him this year. So they could get those guys involved, but they're not your game breakers. You've got to go out and trade for a DK Metcalf or at least sign a Jarvis Landry or a Julio Jones, and then go out in the draft. And you got 2 first-round draft picks. Go after a Drake London. Go after a Garrett Wilson. Go after Burks out of Arkansas. There's some big names out there. Go after Olave out of Ohio State. So you've got a deep wide receiver draft this year. You can fill some holes. The pickup from Kansas City, Jerron Reed, was big at defensive line. So you got Clark, Lowry, and Jerron Reed at defensive line. That'll help the rush defense. Bringing back Devondre Campbell, having him playing alongside Chris Barnes, who is a nice, inexpensive piece at inside linebacker, who's a college free agent. That's Barnes is quietly a really nice inside linebacker. And then you got Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary coming off the edges. That's a good pass rush. And they're already calling it the no-fly zone in Green Bay with Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, and Eric Stokes as the cornerbacks, with Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos as safeties. So they're loaded in pretty much every other position. And, of course, the four-time MVP Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, who needs to not choke in the playoffs. But if he doesn't, then they basically need to add some receivers, and I would put them in the same boat with Tampa and Los Angeles. But right now I just can't, because it's a weapons league, and right now they don't have the weapons. They did solve a really, really big problem, though, because by signing Rich Bisaccia, who before he became the interim head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, he was pretty much the best special teams coach in the NFL for several years running. I thought if there was one thing the Raiders did well, it was always kicking and punting and returning. And if Green Bay can win the field position battle, or at least win it more than they normally do, that's worth a few games a year. And they don't lose more than a few games a year. So that's extremely helpful. You just gotta figure that part of it out. The Saints bringing back Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith. The move to tight end for Taysom Hill is huge. We'll see what Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton can do at quarterback. I still love their defense. Dennis Allen, as their head coach, is going to make sure that defense still gives Tom Brady fits. I think the Saints are going to be a wild card team. Arizona Cardinals. I don't know what's going on with Kyler Murray, but he does have some weapons. Zach Ertz and DeAndre Hopkins. Rondale Moore. They did lose a couple with Christian Kirk, but I still think they have a lot of weapons there. James Conner in the backfield. And still have a nice defense. Although losing Chandler Jones is going to hurt. But I don't put them in the same league as the Rams and the Buccaneers. I think Arizona is probably right around where the Packers are right now, with the Packers missing their weapons. 49ers, interesting team. Debo is an incredible athlete. I'm not sure what you call him as far as a position, and of course George Kittle at tight end, Elijah Mitchell, their running back. Jimmy Garoppolo is still on that team, and I don't know how, but he's still there. I think his price tag's too high. No one wants to pay what Garoppolo wants to get paid. So he might go into next year as still part of that team. But then who's starter on day one? Do you start Trey Lance, or is Jimmy Garoppolo still your starter? Still got a good offensive line. Still have a really good defense. There are three indispensable pieces to that San Francisco team, though. Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel. If any of those three players miss any significant time, that team is in trouble, because all three of those guys are so important. If Nick Bosa gets hurt, that defense can't do what it wants to do in how it operates. if either Kittle or Samuel gets hurt, that offense can't operate the way it wants to. The reason Samuel is so good at what he does is because you can't ignore Kittle. And the reason Kittle is so good at what he does is because you can't ignore Samuel. And the reason San Francisco's defense is so good at what you do, because you always have to double and triple team Bosa. So those three players are so important that if just one of them gets hurt, that could cause some problems because they don't have that nuclear quarterback that can put the team on his shoulders and win them 4 or 5 games with the strength of his right or left arm. A la Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay. A la Tom Brady, Tampa Bay. A la Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City. San Fran doesn't have that guy. Mahomes is a game manager, and we haven't seen what Trey Lance can do. Seattle, they're almost like Houston right now. They're in total rebuild mode. Carolina, Atlanta, much the same way. Minnesota and Chicago, let's put it this way. They fired their head coach in a division where Detroit didn't. So we'll see what they look like. I don't know. Washington picked up Carson Wentz. I don't know. I see what Carson's stats are, but stats are nice. You have to show up at the right time, though. And Carson does not. He's also not a good locker room guy. Guys don't fight for him. Philadelphia might be an interesting story. We'll see what Jalen Hurts looks like. Defense is usually pretty good in Philly, so that'll help them out. Devontae Smith, pure speed. Had a really nice rookie year. Dallas, odds-on favorite in that division. CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. I don't know what in the hell Ezekiel Elliott's still doing there. It's his contract that is causing them to have to cut all these other people loose. That's why Amari Cooper's not there. I don't know if Jerry Jones is having nostalgia flashbacks to Emmitt Smith, and that's why he doesn't want to let go of Zeke. But Zeke is not the same player he was 5 years ago. Randy Gregory's gone. They had to pick up Dante Fowler. Dante Fowler is not Randy Gregory. Their pass rush is going to suffer. Micah Parsons, kid's incredible. He's the best thing I've seen since Lawrence Taylor. Still got Trevon Diggs, cornerback. They may have to almost move Micah Parsons down to pass rusher all the time with Gregory gone now, though. We'll have to see what that all looks like. But obviously there's dissension among the ranks at the top with McCarthy, with Dan Quinn, with Jerry Jones. We don't know what that's going to look like going forward. New York Giants with Brian Daboll as the head coach. They brought in Tyrod Taylor. I don't know if he's going to compete with Daniel Jones. They're saying Saquon's not on the market. You got some weapons. Galladay, Toney, Shepard. Tackling machine and Blake Martinez. I keep hearing James Bradbury's about to get traded to somebody, but they haven't pulled the trigger yet. Nice defensive line, but I don't see the Giants making much noise. You know, I think the hierarchy is the Buccaneers and the Rams, and then you've got pretty much the Packers, and then a combination of maybe the 49ers, the Cardinals, the Saints, and the Cowboys. I'm not sure who else to throw in there. Maybe the Eagles too. So it's basically like 3 tiers with the Buccaneers and the Rams up at the top, the Packers, the one team that's just right below them, And if they find a receiver or two, especially before the draft, then I would put them in the same group with the other two because the rest of their roster is pretty much loaded. And then you've got the other 5 or 6 teams that are all just kind of could sneak in there. Beyond that, I'm not sure what the NFC really has. None of them have, I don't want to say none, because Tampa Bay with Tom Brady, LA with Matt Stafford, and Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, you definitely have to say are outstanding quarterbacks. I don't know if you could put Dak or Jalen from Dallas or Philly in that conversation, or Jameis from New Orleans. Definitely not Garoppolo. Maybe Kyler, but he's kind of acting like a diva right now, so I don't know. But the NFC isn't anywhere near as loaded with quarterback play as the AFC is right now. But who knows? That may mean that the AFC beats the hell out of each other all year long and limps into the Super Bowl, and the NFC team goes into the Super Bowl with a 15-2 record and relatively healthy. I mean, I looked at my Packers, and their schedule, they only play 3 road games against playoff teams: the Bills, the Buccaneers, and the Eagles. And up until just recently, the Buccaneers didn't have Tom Brady. So really, the only team that they were going to play that they were going to be favored to lose against was the Bills, because they were going to be favored in all their games at home. They get the Patriots at home, they get the Rams at home, they get the Cowboys at home, they get the Titans at home. They got to play the Bills and the Buccaneers on the road, which they're going to be favored to lose, and they got to play the Philadelphia Eagles on the road. But the Packers will probably be favored against the Eagles. So, I mean, that's a 15-2 record with the roster they have now if they pick up some wide receivers. So you could have an NFC team like the Buccaneers or the Packers or the Rams or somebody have a hell of a good season, stay relatively injury-free, and watch these AFC teams just bloodbath one another. It could happen. It could happen. Well, all right, folks. Well, it's been fun chatting with you. Sonship Sports here, and we will talk again soon.